Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Robin from Western Mass, the co-host of the Morgellons Call of the Week. It is Easter Sunday, April 4th, 2021. Can't believe it, 2021. And we are here for you. I went through hell and back with Morgellons, and through prayer and advice and prayer, I found Richard Kuhn's and his book and this call. It changed my life. It helped me get my life back. It's been a long process. It was like 5 months after I found the protocols and the diet in the book. Then, of course, I got reinfested, which is easy to do. Because you have to disinfect things. That's one of the things we'll talk about on the call today. And I didn't. I had put it away. It was like 3 years, and I just forgot. So I'm at the tail end of my second infestation and doing great. Things are 90% clear. I'm able to eat more and more things. I'm still working on my cookbook. And so, yeah, things are good, and I'm grateful to give back and to be here. And so let me introduce Richard to you guys. Richard, for those of you who are new, Richard Kuhn's has struggled with these things. He had Lyme disease, he had Morgellons, he had springtails, he had strong rheoides, and he found through trial and error over a couple of years a diet that helps starve them out of your body. He also created protocols, and we as his research team has added to them. So he has written 10 editions of his book because he never stops researching and learning, unlike the medical profession that in general does not do. And it's very exciting. He's in the 11th, he's writing the 11th edition of the book, and I could not have gotten as far as I have without the book and without the diet. It's just been, it's a wonderful resource. It's a lifesaver. I'm so grateful for Richard and his book. And he answers questions. You can email him questions every day if you need to. And you can, he's here on the call to answer questions. Today we have a guest speaker, Jeremy, also. That's going to be very exciting. So here he is, Richard Kuhn's.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. Welcome to our Easter Morgellons event of the week. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm sure Robin will agree with me, and so will Ethel, that our goal here, we know skin parasites is no picnic. Man, it's rough, and what help we get from the medical profession is very limited, if any at all. And yes, there are some specialists, and we'll be talking about them along with Jeremy, our guest, a little later on today. But for those of us who don't have access to these specialists and or for various reasons choose a different route, there's no easy path. And it takes work. And we're here to support you so that you'll say, in the not too far distant future. Now, Robin shared she got her life back in like 5 or 6 months. That is amazing. That is phenomenal. Don't put yourself on that timetable. Please, don't put yourself on that timetable. It could take substantially longer. We're not here to make any promises, but what we can say is that utilizing what we have learned and share with you, you will experience progress. You will feel better. You will start getting your life back, and it will be instrumental so that you'll be able to say, hey, because of you guys, because I came there on Sunday and I hung in there and I stuck with it, because of you, I got through it, and I've gotten my life back. And that's what we want. That's what we want to hear. That's what keeps us going. Somebody said or asked me, what motivates me? Is it money? Is it... No way. What motivates me is hearing your feedback in that, yes, the diet has been instrumental, it's strict, it's difficult. I hate diets. I hate them. I did weight management in my previous profession and stress management for years. We looked at emotional eating. Never talked about diet, because I hated them. But it's the only thing that works here. The only thing. And it's strict. And it's easy to make a mistake. So with that in mind, our guest, Jeremy, are you there, Jeremy? Was with us 2 weeks ago. Jeremy, pronunciation of your last name is Mumphrey? Is that correct?
No, I've heard that one before, though. I have actually heard that before.
You heard what before?
Mumphrey.
Yes, correct me. What?
That's okay, my friend. It's actually Murphree.
Murphree. Okay, Murphree. Okay, like people call me Coons. That's all right.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually Richard Kuhns.
Yes, but what is it? Yeah. So anyway, Jeremy has his own website about Morgellons. He has a podcast, and he's interviewed some very important people in the field from the Morgellons Foundation. And you have a YouTube channel, so he's quite involved in the area. He comes from a different planet than we do. He comes from the medical planet, and we're going to talk about some things. And is there anything that you'd like to add to your biography there, or your experience?
No, actually, you did cover what I was initially wanting to express, which is that you and I have different views on Morgellons, but we're trying to cooperate with each other to better inform the public in general.
Thank you. Well, you were on 2 weeks ago, and we got it was the longest, I think, call we've ever had, and we ended up with an important, I feel, a very important subject there, where there is a tremendous difference of opinion, and that is the difference between Morgellons being infectious and contagious.
Yeah, a lot of the problems that we have with Morgellons is that because of the media attention, people began to identify with the term because it was a misunderstood term. It was a not clearly well-defined medical condition. It wasn't really well accepted. I got to apologize for my room back here. I know you guys are looking at my bed. I had to rearrange my whole office here last weekend. So I haven't got my green screen back up yet, but that's what's going on there.
That's all right. Well, from our experience, and could be different than, I know that you're going the medical route and you're going through the antibiotics. And can you give us a little history? You've had this since birth, correct? And what has transpired, a little bit what you've gone through and what you've done?
Now, my mom told me that when I was 2 years old, I had a bad bout with vomiting and diarrhea, and they took me to the emergency room. And several weeks, maybe months later, I started to develop sores on my body. So that was around 2 to 3 years old. I had, the best I can remember, my eczema was very severe, especially on the insides of my elbows and knees. The skin was hyperpigmented, and I do recall seeing a blue fuzz around the perimeter sometimes, not all the time. Amber crystals was often inside these ulcerations. And I say they're ulcerations, but, being my age, I can't really recall if they itched so bad that they were in fact lacerated. But my gut feeling tells me that they were ulcerations as they are today. Now, around 2010, I developed a bullseye rash, and that's typically the point of reference that we use when we're talking about my history. I can't really go back because I don't have any medical records when I was a kid, and we really don't know what's going on. It'd be kind of hard to. One of my parents has already passed away, so it's hard.
So until 2010, there wasn't any kind of treatment that you did for this. You suffered all that time with the itching. Did you have the itching and the biting sensations during that period of time?
No. Let me clarify. My skin actually cleared up late in my teen years, and my skin was relatively normal through my 20s, maybe my late 20s. I did have some marks on my skin, but it wasn't terribly bad. I believe my immune system was in check for the most part. dark spots on the skin is typical for spirochetal infections, and growing up I was bitten by ticks several times. So there was multiple opportunities for that vector introduction of the pathogen. I did want to clarify also that or disclose rather, that I did take a course from Duke University in collaboration with Kilimanjaro Christian University College in Tanzania for parasitology. So I do know a little bit about parasites from that course, and that's my point of reference there. But yeah, in regards to your question, it was about 2010 that my skin really started to take a note. Actually, it was about 2004 that my skin really started to develop new ulcerations. The dark spots was diagnosed as impetigo one time. Interestingly enough, the treatment for impetigo was the same as the treatment for syphilis, 3 shots of intramuscular penicillin. That's not the same as the treatment for neurosyphilis, which is 3 weeks of IV antibiotics. But we'll get back to that at some point later down the road. Right now, what we know scientifically is that Morgellons is associated with spirochetal bacteria. And we've seen relapsing fever, which is a Borrelia bacteria. Lyme disease, of course. Some people have reported, some doctors treating Morgellons have reported leptospirosis, which is also a Borrelia bacteria. A lot of people in the scientific and medical community believe that it's possible Morgellons is associated with treponemes, and we have found Treponema denticola in Morgellons disease specimens, but that hasn't been consistent, so we can't really say that that's the case or not.
Would you explain what treponeme is for us lay people?
No, it's treponeme. Treponema and Borrelia are 2 kinds of bacteria that are in the same family, the spirochetal. Spirochete because they're spiral-shaped, and they drill into the tissue and bone. Some species may be more virulent than others. Some species only inhabit certain parts of the body. For example, Treponema denticola is a common bacteria that's associated with dental cavities, but it typically resides in the mouth. You wouldn't find it like inhabiting a foot too often. However, to be clear, science has only within the past 60 years been able to identify these microbes on a molecular level, and only within the past 5 or 10 years have we been able to actually culture this bacteria in a viable manner so that we can have it alive long enough to study it.
Well, being that Morgellons disease for many people literally destroys their mouth to the point where their teeth may even fall out, I haven't seen any studies, enlighten me if there are, that they have taken cultures from these people and found this particular spirochete that you're speaking of, the trypamine, in the mouth area. Are you aware of any?
Yes. Now, you and I did a little tit for tat between now and the last time I was on the show. I did start reading your book, as a matter of fact. I'm not too far into it. I'm excited about reading more about the King's Diet. But I need you to read The History of Morgellons from Delusion to Definition, because the culture methods and molecular testing methods that I'm talking about are reported in that research. And while we're on the call here, I'll pull up some of that research and give you a quote too, so we can.
Sure, I don't mind. I just haven't seen it. I did see the study that they did do where they used about 12 people and found that 90% of them did have one of 2 types of spirochetes, but it wasn't one of those, of the trypamine wasn't one of them. So, you know, I'm always interested in the research.
Let me see if I can share a screen with you too, because I wanted to show you the screenshot that I was talking about the other day, where I've got microscopic images of the Morgellons fibers being grown from the human skin. Let me see if I can't get this thing to share my screen. No, I don't see an easy way to do that right off the bat. But
well, that's okay. I don't doubt that that spirochete is in the mouth, and that is a contributing factor, and a lot of people do have tremendous problems with the mouth. I'm not going to question that one bit. I would say that that is absolutely on target. I don't know if everybody with Morgellons disease would fall in that category and deal with that. But I don't question it in many people who do have the issues with the mouth. But the point I wanted to get back to was the difference between contagious and infectious, because when we talk to the average person on the street, I don't think I mean, even me, you know, what's the difference? Big deal. What's the difference? If you get it from, people have our experience is that many of us are infested by mites or springtails, and these things have a way of coming off of our bodies, and if another human being or animal is in the vicinity, has the ability to transfer to another human being or to another animal, and whether it's infectious or contagious, I don't see what the difference is. The end result is the same.
Well, contagious infers that you could pick it up by having close contact with someone. And close contact is not the same as sexual contact. That would be infectious. If you're having to put, like, fluids from your body inside another person's body, that's infectious. But if you're just walking past them and, you know, the air you breathe in, the humidity...
How about hugging? How about hugging them?
No, that's contagious also. That would be like picking up the cold.
Okay, so our experience is people do get it that way. They do get it from hugging. They do get it from, I mean, I've had people tell me that they sat in a boardroom across from somebody and they saw this spit coming out of their mouth. This is before COVID. And then after that, they started experiencing the symptoms simply from that kind of thing.
So what happens? No, it's okay. And I just want to point out also in the chat, I uploaded that screenshot so you can take a look at it. What happens is, like I was talking about, identifying with the term Morgellons, if people experience confounding symptoms and the doctor isn't able to easily resolve them, that's when they start to adopt the Morgellons moniker. And people, they have to be clear that Morgellons specifically is one symptom. It is the fibers embedded in the skin tissue. That's what we discussed on the last episode. So if a person doesn't have the fibers, then they're likely not dealing with Morgellons. Where people have a problem is they don't understand that initial concept. So they might think that the itching and maybe the sores, a rash, or even some other strange symptoms might have something to do with Morgellons, when in fact it doesn't have any. It's strange and it needs to be resolved.
Okay, thank you. But what I'd like to get back to is, okay, we have people who have the filaments and the fibers, and the vector, the infectious vector, or was a mite, perhaps, could have been springtails or something of that nature, and they are also on that person's body, and by hugging another person, then that person picks up the Morgellons from the vector, which might be a mite or columbella, springtails. That makes it contagious, as you just said. Hugging
No.
body
Like
contact.
we said last week, that makes it infectious. Because like you said last week, that insect has to bite the person and infect them with the pathogen.
Well, okay, so we're looking at, from my point of view, we're looking at semantics.
That's where we arrived to last week, the conclusion.
Right.
Yeah.
So by the Morgellons Foundation saying it is not contagious,
Well, the science.
They are leading people to believe that they can go anywhere they want, being infected with mites or being infected with springtails, that have the ability to leave their bodies and affect somebody else in close proximity. They're leading these people to believe that's not going to happen, that you can't pick up Morgellons from another person. Whether you call it contagious or infectious, doesn't matter. And that's a big problem.
Well, it's not if it's true, though, and that's what science has shown us, is that, in fact, Morgellons is not contagious, but it results from an infectious process.
But do you understand what I'm saying? The average person, if my client has Morgellons, and is also infected with mites or springtails. And the granddaughter comes over, and she hugs the granddaughter. And she hugs the granddaughter, and the granddaughter picks it up. Whether it's infectious or contagious doesn't matter. The Morgellons Foundation led them awry. They gave them bad information. One person can give it to another person. Whether you call it infectious or contagious, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. The result is the same.
Well, and I want to disclose again that I'm not associated with the Charles Holman Foundation. And the Morgellons Research Foundation, like we discussed last week, is no longer in business. It's the Charles Holman Foundation. And I know that everybody has different views. My perspective is always going to be based on what's indexed over at PubMed, the peer-reviewed research. So the way I'm approaching it is that we don't have evidence that Morgellons is contagious. We have compelling evidence that it results from an infectious process. If I can refer to the screenshot that I put in the chat here, everything that is stained in that series of pictures, everything that is stained purple, or that kind of pinkish color, is reacting to an anti-Borrelia or a Borrelia antibody stain. Those cells that you're looking at in the far right, those are keratinocytes and fibroblasts. So those cells are infected with spirochetes, all those cells that are stained purple or pink. And what this series of pictures shows is a cross-section of tissue with Morgellons fibers. Those are Morgellons fibers. And as you can see, as it zooms into that last picture on the end, or I'm sorry, the middle picture, that Morgellons fiber literally grows from a pavement of those epithelial cells. So Morgellons, the fibers originate from inside the body, and they seem to result from these cells that are in these skin cells that are infected with the spirochetal bacteria.
Okay. But getting back to our original, I led you down the path where Grandma has Morgellons, her vector was mites. She is not in any kind of medical treatment. She is just finding out that she's got Morgellons. She's gone to the Morgellons Foundation. She's read their information that says it is not contagious. And she has her granddaughter over for Easter, and she hugs her granddaughter, and these vectors on her transfer to her granddaughter, and her granddaughter goes home and a couple days later develops the filaments and fibers and Morgellons. Why is that not contagious? Why is that not public knowledge?
Well, it's not likely either. I mean, the fibers...
It is very likely. Very likely.
How long did you say it took the fibers to develop after she was exposed to mites?
Well, generally they might develop. My experience was they developed in one day with me upon exposure to the contagion. One day.
Did they develop in one day, or did you notice them the day after?
Well, I noticed the lesion, and it was very big, and in that lesion, it developed over the lesion developed, it started in one day. It took me 4 days to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But there were filaments in that lesion, so they can be very quick. Yet the other thing, Jeremy, being here and having spoken, these are not my experiences. These are the experiences people share with me. Yep. I have found in my experience people have, and there are no people with Morgellons who have exactly the same two symptoms, or even, even the filaments differ in size, color, intensity, thickness, length. The symptoms differ. Some people have ulceration, some people have none. Some people have black goo, some people have white goo, some people have none, biofilm. Some people have, some people have fungal associated infections, some people don't. Some people have columbular, some people don't. It's like some people have organisms coming from their body, could be plastic organisms. I've seen these pictures of 3/4 of an inch length to 3 inches in length of these things. So it's an infinite variety of how symptoms that show up and complications. Robin.
I'd like to say, just to get back, I think that the issue is that the people on the medical end, who Jeremy is talking about, have not studied the vectors so much. They're just focusing on the actual Morgellons and the fibers. And I know that the vectors are a huge thing, which is where the disinfecting the environment comes in. And I mean, like, my car was infected and I had to take a 10-hour trip. And when I got out of my car, I was covered with lesions. Right away. I mean, and in those lesions was fibers. It was simultaneous, instantaneous. So, you know, but my car was infected with springtails, and that was the vector. I think that, and not everyone is sensitive to vectors. Like, I had fleas in my house, and I hired an exterminator who brought in the springtails, but he never got bit, so he didn't believe me that there were even fleas here. You know, I mean, our experience is colored by our personal experience, but at the same time, so many people have vectors for Morgellons, and they don't always see the fibers because sometimes they can be pretty tiny. They can be microscopic, right? So, the lesions may be from the vectors, they may be from the spirochetes, but everyone that ends up with Morgellons has some kind of discomfort.
But yes, and it does seem like the doctors do ignore the co-infections, whether they be mites or whether they be springtails or Strongyloides cervicalis. In fact, that years ago, there was a guy who was claiming there is no such thing as Morgellons. Everybody's got Strongyloides cervicalis. You know, they're full of it. There's no thing. I mean, so, but these are other factors that factor in that are generally, I think, largely ignored by the Morgellons Foundation and the medical community, even Dr. Cornish, Dr. Saverly, Dr. Bransfield, anybody in the specialty basically ignores these things in the contribution. But what I want to know is, what do we tell Grandma when her granddaughter comes over? Do we tell her not to hug, to stay away? That's what I tell her. Or do we tell her, go ahead and hug, there won't be any problem? What do we tell Grandma? What do you tell Grandma, Jeremy?
No, go ahead and hug. I mean, we don't know how much longer Grandma's going to be around, right?
And you want Grandma, you know how many people have cried at night because they involuntarily infected their granddaughter?
Well, see, that's a matter of perspective, though.
It's not. It's experience. It's experience. How many people have you actually talked to? I've talked to thousands.
Wait a minute, Richard, you've seen my YouTube channel. I've got a lot of subscribers.
I've seen your YouTube channel, but when I hear you talk, you use jargon. I don't use jargon.
I'm telling you, my perspective is from what science has been able to demonstrate.
Well, let's go on your YouTube channel and let's hear people.
Wait a minute.
Let's hear people talk. Let's hear people share. We have people here today that can share.
Yeah, let me talk.
Can I interrupt? Wait, guys, let's bring it down a notch, okay? So here's the thing. Science is, Morgellons, just like chronic Lyme was not even recognized for years. I had chronic Lyme and was in bed for years. Okay, so Morgellons is a fairly new subject for scientists and doctors. The research is developing. And yeah, they've been doing it for a while, but it's just really developing. And the thing is that people have been, I infected my cats, okay? I hugged and pet my cats, and I infected them. I infected 2 other people. They got close to me, they developed Morgellons. But luckily, I knew how to get rid of it, and they were able to get rid of it quickly, okay? And, you know, it could have been, and it was through vectors, but it was still, it happened. And this part of it has not been really examined by the medical profession. Because, you know, more by veterinarians or...
No. You got to quit calling Marianne Middlebeat a veterinarian. We cleared that up.
I'm not calling her. I wasn't even thinking of her. I was thinking of the fact that I went to my vet and I went to veterinarian departments of colleges to identify things, samples that I sent them, and they were much more helpful than doctors. I wasn't talking about Marianne.
Oh, okay. My bad.
I know she's a microbiologist. I have deep respect for her, and I believe what she has found. But that's not what I was talking about. I'm just saying that
you said
in general, the medical profession doesn't look at the vectors and doesn't look at the contagion factor in that way.
Well, they may not be looking at it like you would want them to or expect them to look at it, but they have looked at it thoroughly. I know my doctor is especially concerned about having potential vectors inside my house, and most doctors are. I mean, it depends on what kind of doctor you go see, what kind of experience you get. But like Robin, like you said earlier, your experience is colored, by what you know and your own experiences. And so what I'm saying is that you can tell me that you infected your cat with Morgellons, and I'm going to challenge that because I know that that's not how Morgellons works. I'm still going to be respectful when you allow me to come on the show, but my understanding of Morgellons is different.
Think about it this way, though. Here's the thing. I had springtails, and I had mites, and I had fleas, and they all brought me Morgellons, and it took me 3 years to get rid of them. My cat developed fleas and springtails and mites and Morgellons.
So the infestation is different than Morgellons. Morgellons isn't an infestation.
No, but the infestation was in my body.
Well, let's get back. Yeah, let's forget the cats. Let's get back to the 2 people you infected.
Well, you may have exposed them to an infestation, but Morgellons is just a skin condition. It's not an infestation itself.
Right, but the things that I exposed them to carry Morgellons, and then they developed it.
Can you share the actual experience of how you contacted these people, how close you were in proximity, what was going on, so we can dissect this?
I'm in a duo with a tap dancer. I'm a musician. We had a rehearsal, and we were about, I want to say, 2 feet apart. We were actually songwriting together. We both had guitars, and we spent a couple of hours, and within a day, she developed bites on the back of her neck, rash, lesions, itching on her body. At that time, that was actually before I knew about the diet or Richard's book, but I knew that peppermint oil was a really good disinfectant, and I gave her a little spray bottle of peppermint oil, told her to wash her clothes, spray her skin, and she got clear in 2 days. But she had the fibers. It was almost instantaneous, and she got better. That was just one example.
And the other one?
Here's another one. I had a friend who was helping me disinfect my home, and what I found with the mites and the springtails was when you attack them, they attack you back, and they went right into his eyes, and he had the cotton balls, and he had the crustiness, and he had the itchiness, and he actually took a shower with a strong mouthwash and washed his whole body, and he got rid of them quickly. But that was scary, and that was horrifying to me that would happen to somebody, a good friend of mine.
Would you say you felt guilty? Badly?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, I did. And it was definitely Morgellons. And the thing is that, I kept finding things in my environment that I would take to a local entomologist. And it turns out that in my environment, I had gotten clear of a lot of the vectors, but there were these things in my environment, and they were all fibers. I mean, they looked like bugs, and he said, well, sometimes bugs wrap threads around themselves, and he put them in alcohol, and then he examined them under a molecular microscope, and there were no, none of the vectors were there. They were just the fibers everywhere, everything that I found. So
let's see if anybody else is on the call that would like to contribute to the subject. What your experience was. Anybody else on the call? Whether you perhaps were in close proximity to somebody else who was infected and you started experiencing symptoms and developed the filaments or fibers, or whether you were in proximity, you were infected and somehow being in close proximity to someone else, they developed it. Anyone on the call would like to share that? Do *6 to unmute yourself if you're muted.
I talked to a friend of mine who had Morgellons, and he said that he didn't even have to he'd walk into a room and everyone in the room would start itching. You know, one of the doctors, they were in my eyes, and I went to my eye doctor. I had this massive, like, my eye was blood red and it was infected, and he pulled out this long, he thought it was a cat hair. He said, how could you have this in your eye and it didn't bother you? It was a giant filament, you know, and he didn't know what it was. He didn't believe I had Morgellons. He just thought I had but it wasn't a cat hair. It didn't irritate me. It was, my whole eye was inflamed.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have too many people weigh in, and like I say, this is very much like a pilot study. I did a study about maybe 12 years ago when I was doing a lot of searching, and I wanted to know if nicotine had any impact on these organisms. My theory was that smokers weren't affected by them as much as non-smokers were, and I was a non-smoker. So I sent out a questionnaire to, I don't know, hundreds of people, and wow, the first 15 or 20 responses I got, they were all non-smokers. You know, said, hey, wow, you know, my study is complete. I'm done. If you're a smoker, you're good. And then all of a sudden the smoker started replying. You know, smokers have a tendency to put things off, you know, like they put off stopping smoking. And so my pilot study, you know, was out the window because I only, in the beginning, if I had based my assumptions on just those first returns, I would have really been misled.
Interesting.
One other thing, Jeremy, you still there?
Right here.
Yeah, okay. One of the other things is the incidence of delusions of parasitosis.
Yeah.
These numbers I can't get a fix on. Page 145 of Dr. Saverly's book, she uses 0.02%. That's 2 out of 10,000 delusions parasitosis. And the National Pedullosis Society did a study back around 2002, before the word Morgellons was even coined. They found 18 out of 20 people who were diagnosed with delusions of parasitosis were dealing with springtails. And they weren't even looking for Morgellons or filaments or fibers. There's a researcher at Mayo Clinic that estimated about 27 out of 1,000 delusions of parasitosis. The CDC says 8.3 out of 100,000 have Lyme disease. So I don't know if Dr. Saverly made a mistake in her decimal point or what. Or maybe this is the spinach thing, like, you know, the mistake that they made back in, what, the 40s or 50s, that spinach has so much iron, and we have Popeye, that type of mistake here. But if two people... What's that?
Did you see the Popeye movie with Robin Williams?
No, I didn't.
Oh, crap, man. Wow, that was a good movie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They don't make movies like that anymore.
This is the kind of research we don't have and we really need, and we can't get a fix. I've talked to parasitologists around the country. I've talked to, there was a lady in Connecticut who led the department there about infectious organisms, and she didn't have any numbers, but she definitely declared that you can't be infected by a mite, that mites can't live on your body. She swore it. Absolutely impossible. So
that's not true.
We have such a big disparity, not only between what you and I believe and our experiences, but with science. There is no science.
I wanted to read you this passage from this Chinese study on Morgellons. This came out in 2018. It's called Reframing Delusional Infestation.
But, excuse me, do you remember that Morgellons came from China back in 2008? They were talking about all the cotton coming in was infected with Morgellons.
No.
So I just thought I'd mention that out there.
I saw a news story back during the 2008 elections that Jill Stein had Morgellons.
So
everybody wants to get on board. Okay, so this study is called Reframing Delusional Infestation Perspectives on Unresolved Puzzles. And what it says here is the first step needs to determine whether delusion exists or not. A delusion is defined as a firmly but false belief held with strong conviction and contrary to the superior evidence. It is distinct from beliefs based on an unusual perception such as fornication. The beliefs that patients hold can be delusion, true observations, or overvalued ideas.
Before you go on, could you define the word fornication for those lay people who don't know the jargon?
Yeah, and it's fornication with an M, not fornication. That's
we get that mixed up. I get it mixed up all the time.
So fornication can result from a variety of reasons. Oftentimes it's because somebody's taken too much stimulants and their nervous system is overcharged, and that results in a crawling, stinging, biting feeling underneath the skin. The actual bacteria itself, Lyme disease and syphilis, relapsing fever, they can cause that same kind of crawling, itching, biting sensation underneath the skin because the bacteria has infected nerve cells.
Also, drug addicts have some of the very same symptoms, right?
Yeah, the amphetamines will, when somebody takes speed, yeah. So, this must be determined on a case-by-case basis. The presentation of a specimen is not a delusional behavior. Patients with DI/MD, or delusional infestation/Morgellons disease, with animate or inanimate objects can exist, but the belief of cutaneous fibers may or may not be delusional. A physician is required to perform fiber analysis to identify the nature of fibers. If fibers are present and biofilaments of human origin, then they are a true observation. It is also possible that patients might observe fibers and mistake them for worms, in which case the idea of infestation could be an overvalued idea. Real infestation with arthropods, such as mites, can also occur. Additionally, some patients could have lesions with adhering textile fibers that are accidental contaminants and could mistakenly believe that they have Morgellons disease, in which case they do not have a delusional belief, but a mistaken belief. In summary, if a physician cannot differentiate between true observations, delusions, and overvalued ideas, they should not immediately make a diagnosis of delusional mental illness.
And yet they do, time and time again.
And so right there, that Chinese study said, yes, mites can infest your body.
That's good news, and very, very rare that we hear any. There's just not enough research or enough people doing anything to this field. We're so busy with. But back to the percentages. So if we look at these percentages, if 0.2 is a real percentage, or even if 27 out of 100,000 people diagnosed with delusions of parasitosis actually have parasites, as, for instance, the one little study that we know about, by the National Pedullosis Society, means that Morgellons is actually is a crisis, far higher than, far greater crisis than Lyme disease, 3 times higher than Lyme disease, which is scary as hell. And we don't know. It's like now your opinion is the people to get treatment for Morgellons is where, if you're going to get responsible treatment, where do you go to get responsible treatment for Morgellons?
All right, so that really depends on what you think is your most likely exposure. If you think you most likely contracted Lyme disease from a tick, you go home.
We're talking about Morgellons. You know, Lyme disease, they're going to go to the doctor, they're going to get the antibiotics, and hopefully...
Morgellons is a condition that results from Lyme disease.
Right.
A lot
Chronic
of
Lyme
Lyme
disease.
doctors are treating Morgellons now.
However, if you think you have syphilis, it may be appropriate to go to the health department. You can have both Lyme and syphilis at the same time. However, the numbers suggest that for every 1 Lyme disease patient, there's going to be 4 syphilis patients.
Wow.
Wow, they're high numbers.
Wow.
So anyway.
I don't know.
Call your representative. Tell them that you want more funding for STDs. By the way, April is STD Awareness Month.
So where should a person go for treatment for Morgellons disease? What would you say is the only reliable or effective treatment?
No, it's going to be different from person to person based on how long they've had the infection. If you acquired the infection congenitally, if you've had it since birth, it may be harder to heal yourself, and you may have lasting damage. We were talking about biofilms. Those primarily exist inside the body, and we don't have a way to measure them. We can't pry the body open and scrape the veins and see, how much biofilm is up in there.
Okay. Well, most of the people that come that I communicate with, they can pretty well pinpoint the date of infection, or where they were, what they were doing, who they were with, and then there's probably 20% who know about the year it started. And I haven't had anybody that suspected it was congenital or even went back into childhood, such as yourself. So most of these people, they notice the itching, the biting, the symptoms. They go on the internet. They find that, oh yeah, fibrous filaments. Yeah, I probably have fibrous filaments. Now, and where do I go? That's their big question. Where do I go? Where should I go to deal with this?
One of the problems is that they can go to a Lyme literate doctor, but if they have the wrong idea about what Morgellons is, that doctor's not going to help them, because they may have the wrong expectations about how fast the treatment's supposed to work.
Right. That's true. And I want to just say, that also brings us to Richard's diet that he developed. And the diet was a lifesaver for me when I got it right. Took a while, but I think that in terms of dealing with the biofilm inside your body and minimizing, they feed on cortisol and they feed on the sugar, anything that turns into sugar, and this diet is so specific for Morgellons and other parasites, and it turned my life around.
So Robin is saying they should come to the diet, to my diet, but
I think they should come to the diet and then maybe a naturopath or whatever. But the diet is a huge help.
How many doctors do you estimate in the country actually specialize in Morgellons or work with Morgellons, such as Dr. Cornish and Dr. Saverly?
Sure. I think that number's increasing. I tell people to go to the functional medicine doctor because they have a different approach altogether. Mm-hmm. The Lyme literate medical doctor program, the program to certify physicians to be LLMDs, the people that run that program are tightly involved in Morgellons disease research. And so they're going to be most likely to have the cutting-edge information when that occurs.
Estimate how many doctors in this country actually work with Morgellons and won't laugh at the patient?
It's increasing, but right now it's probably 99 to 1.
99?
No, one doctor for every 100 doctors will see a Morgellons patient and not write them off to psych.
Okay,
But,
so
and most of the Lyme doctors, like in my area, well, in my state, there's maybe 4 really good Lyme doctors, and none of them take insurance because they can't treat chronic Lyme and take insurance because that's still controversial.
Well, it's not that they won't take it. It's that the insurance companies won't cover it because, like my doctor, she'll submit the paperwork, but it's up to the insurance company whether or not they're going to cover it.
They're not going to cover it.
No, but they can lose their license.
Very true, yeah.
Well, the point I'm getting at,
it's different from state to state, Robert. Yeah, you're right about that. I didn't consider that, actually. Yeah, you're right.
The point I'm trying to get at is that if we have as much Morgellons as there may be possible out there, being 3 times greater than the amount of Lyme patients, that finding doctors like Dr. Cornish, Dr. Saverly, Dr. Bransfield, in fact, locally here, Dr. Bransfield is a mile away from me. He was my doctor. I referred another person who's, I believe, on the call here with us today. He can't get an appointment with him. So, I mean, what can you do when you can't get an appointment with a specialist? Or what can you do if you can't afford it? What can you do? Where do you go?
Well, my doctor's currently looking for new patients right now, so if you want to give her a call, or her office a call, then you may be able to get in with her pretty easily.
Where are you located?
She's up in, I'm actually in Greenville, South Carolina, but she's up in Virginia. At the Amen Clinics in Virginia. Her name is Dr. Cornish, Dr. Ebony Cornish. She's an ILADS trained LLMD and functional medicine practitioner. Richard, I wanted to go back to what you were asking me about the treatment for Morgellons disease. In my case, I've had Lyme for so long that it's showing up, the sores and stuff are showing up primarily in places where I have lymph nodes. And that's especially concerning, That's where the immune debilitation actually occurs. And, they're getting better, but it's a long process going in, and it's a long process going out. And that's why I was talking about the biofilm, because those communities happen over decades. And
well, what also concerns me is that you're on an antibiotic regime, correct? And that's what most of these Lyme literate doctors do, an antibiotic regime?
Yeah, that's right. But you can have various infections at the same time. So,
well, that's true. The Morgellons Foundation has a pilot study that they did with 12 Lyme patients.
No, Richard, the Charles Holman Foundation doesn't do research. They just raise funds and award grants for scientists who want to study Morgellons.
It's published on their website, right? Dr. Strickler, Medina, they publish it on their website. It is a valid study, right?
Yeah, well, what I'm saying is that they don't actually do the research themselves. They just award grants for scientists who want to do the research. They may syndicate that. Like, I've got that study up on my website, but that doesn't mean that I produced it myself.
Well, I'm not saying, I'm not saying who did it. The research has been there. Dr. Strickler was involved. The microbiologist was involved. They did 12 patients. All of them had Lyme disease. 2 of them had Morgellons. And they found that after treatment, the spirochete was not destroyed. It was still there. That's what the study said.
You're talking about the persistent Borrelia infection in 12 random North American Lyme disease patients despite ongoing treatment. Yeah, right. You're right about that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's some crazy stuff, especially if it gets involved in your central nervous system. I'm very concerned about people being able to access not only reliable diagnosis, but that if they've got it in their central nervous system, appropriate IV antibiotic therapy. You have to go into the vein with the antibiotics if it's in the brain and in the CNS.
But in reading the study, I didn't see the differentiation where the Lyme disease was focused in the body. It was basically said these people were diagnosed with Lyme disease, didn't say that it was in the central nervous system. These were 12 people, as far as I know, taken at random, who had either 2 of them with Morgellons and 10 of them with Lyme disease.
That's right.
And so it may be what you may be saying is true, that when it's in the central nervous system, it's a different story. But the study was not based on 12 people with it affecting the central nervous system, basically.
Well, no, the 2 Morgellons patients were also Lyme disease patients. I mean, Morgellons is a condition.
True. AKA Morgellons, AKA, and there's a Lyme.org, basically, is an organization that says, hey, that's Morgellons.
Yeah.
So, we are aware of that. But, it seems counterintuitive to go the route of, I can see, and like I shared, I've gone both routes. I've gone through Dr. Bransfield, and when you're on the antibiotics, it is true. Nothing matters. I mean, you can live in mites. You could live with these vectors. I don't think they affect you at all. Something gets turned off, that they're not a problem. And when you go off the antibiotics, as happened to me, bang, it all happened over again.
That's why you have to have IV if you've got infection in the central nervous system, because it's just going to keep replicating from where it's the reserves in your brain.
I didn't have it, to my knowledge, I didn't have it, and I got rid of it. I'm here. Right now, I have no Lyme disease. And I didn't do it with antibiotics to get rid of it.
It's called neuroborreliosis when it gets into your brain.
Well, we don't want that happening, And okay, so we're not going to look at the differentiation of them, because the average person, the average doctor, there are no tests actually to tell that. Even the Western blot test has too many negatives. In my opinion, the only one is microscopy. That's the only effective test.
Yeah, the lumbar puncture.
Yeah, that's the only effective test is microscopy. Anything else is a pig's guess. So
I just want to say one thing, Jeremy. I think what Richard was describing, where you go on the antibiotics and then you get reinfected or sick again when you go off, has more to do with the vectors. It's like the antibiotics heal what's going on in your body on an ongoing basis, and then if your house is infected with mites and spring.
If you open up that box, up, that
my Christmas ornaments that I opened up,
you're starting all over again. You're starting at zero.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you can't rule out that possibility. It's just that that's not as likely as you haven't been getting your teeth cleaned for the past few years, and that biofilm that's inside your mouth is continuously making you sick. That was one of my big problems, was that I went for 16 years without getting my teeth cleaned. And you have to get it sandblasted off you have to go in there and have her sandblast the funk right off your teeth. I mean, brushing it's going to help, but it's not going to be the same as sandblasting it. I'll give you a good example. Swimming pool guy comes out, and there's a big green blob at the bottom of the pool. And so he puts the shock in, and he figures, okay, that's twice the amount, it'll kill it. He goes back, and it's still there at the bottom of the pool. He goes, holy crap, I'll put 4 times the amount in there. He comes back the next day, the dog is dead, but that green blob is still at the bottom of the pool. So what he has to do is he has to actually scrub it with the brush, because that is biofilm. That green blob at the bottom of the pool is a mass of bacteria and other funk that's collected and trying to survive at the bottom of the pool.
Right. Well, that's one of the things we do address in our program. We have our mouthwash, which is incredibly effective with the biofilm. We have the enzymes that we use that are specially designed to break up biofilm. So we do tackle it. And well, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I call it a show. It's a call. This is not a show. We're not showmen here. This is a call. And we're here to educate. We're here to look at different points of view. And hopefully we can come together somehow, because in my experience, I'm not going to tell Grandma to hug her son, her daughter, or anybody. Jeremy, you could go ahead and tell them to hug everybody they want, but when they yell at you, don't get upset with me.
I won't.
So, and when we look at the approach, the antibiotics, fine. Go get the antibiotics, but make sure that's not the only thing you do, because when you come off of them, you want to be aware of the vectors, and you then have the choice. You go back and get more antibiotics. To me, I was afraid that my immune system wouldn't know how to handle it once I went off the antibiotics. It wouldn't know how to deal with a common cold. And someone had called emailed me during the week that she had been on them for a very long time, and I thought she was going to be on the call today. Is she on the call today? She was going to share her experience?
Yeah, there was a question that we were going to ask or answer that we got during the week on Facebook. I believe it was Janice.
What was that question? Do you remember? I remember that name. I don't know if it's the same Janice.
I didn't get to the question. I was busy.
Oh, okay. All right. Does anybody on the call have a question before we say goodbye to Jeremy? I'm sorry.
It's okay, my friend.
Anybody have a question?
I just want to thank you, Jeremy. I really appreciate your research and your input, and I think it's great to hear your viewpoint. And even though we may not totally agree about everything, it's really helpful. It is.
Yes, I from the bottom of my heart, I want to share. Thank you. And before I forget it, let me give the disclosures that the FDA requires. I don't think we gave any advice here, but I just want to be clear. The FDA requires us, all of us on this program, to inform you that before you accept any of our recommendations, that you thoroughly discuss them with your medical doctor before you do so, to make sure they do not interfere with any health problems you're presently experiencing, and that we're not here to treat, cure, or mitigate any disease. We're here to educate, and that's what the program has been about. So again, thank you, Jeremy. If you like to or want to, you can stay with us and for the rest of the program and share if you like.